Welcome back to our series on the laws of health.
Dobrodošli na našu seriju predavanja o zakonima zdravlja.
We're sort of covering 8 different laws.
Mi ćemo pokrivati nekih 8 različitih zakona.
So far we've covered diet,
Do sada smo pokrili ishranu,
exercise, water, sunshine.
fizičku aktivnost, vodu i sunčevu svetlost.
Right now we're going to talk about temperance or self-control.
Ali sada ćemo govoriti o umerenosti ili samokontroli.
So what exactly is that?
Šta je to u stvari?
Well, we can look at it in 2 different ways.
Možemo da sagledamo to sa 2 različite načina.
One, it's doing in moderation all things that are good.
Znači, umereno koristiti sve što je dobro.
You can exercise too much.
Vi možete i previše fizički da budete aktivni.
That's not a really common thing, but some people do.
To nije učestalo, ali se to kod nekih ljudi dešava.
Some people sleep too much.
Neki ljudi previše spavaju.
If you get too much sunshine, it's called a sunburn.
Ako ste previše izloženi sunčevoj svetlosti, onda ćete izgoreti.
And I go to some countries where people just work too much.
I bio sam u nekim zemljama gde ljudi rade previše.
And I've known people who talk too much
Ja znam i ljude koji previše govore
and eat too much.
i jedu previše.
But these are all things that we need to do in moderation.
Ali sve ovo mi moramo da radimo umereno.
And then there's the other side,
A onda postoji druga strana.
abstaining from all things that are harmful.
Da se klonimo od svih stvari koje su štetne za nas.
Now we know that narcotics should never be put into the body.
Narkotici nikad ne bi trebali da se stave u telo.
People are addicted to playing games.
Ljudi su ovisni od toga da igraju igrice.
Junk food is killing our young generation.
Nezdrava hrana ubija naše mlade generacije.
Alcohol is killing the rest of us.
Alkohol ubija ostatak nas.
And then there's tobacco.
I onda imamo duvan
And then there is caffeine.
i kofein.
Now that could be coffee, tea, cola, chocolate.
To može da bude kafa, čaj, Coca-Cola ili čokolada.
As much as we like them, they're not good things to put in our bodies.
Koliko god mi to volimo, to nije dobro da stavljamo u naše telo.
But now the next one's going to surprise you.
Ali sljedeći će vas iznenaditi.
80% of cow's milk is called casein.
80% proteina kravljega mleka je kazein.
And when a person puts cow's milk into their bodies,
I kada osoba stavlja kravlje mleko u svoje telo,
it's metabolized and there's a thing called casomorphin.
ono prođe kod metabolizam i stvara se kazonomorfin.
And morphin is sort of like morphine.
Morfin je kao morfijum.
Okay. Now, what does that do?
Šta to čini?
Especially to children.
Pogotovo deci.
Some scientists are telling us that it can cause ADHD and autism.
Neki naučnici govore da on može da prouzrokuje autizam i ADHD.
We need to be very, very careful with what we put into our children's bodies.
Moramo da budemo jako pažljivi šta stavljamo u tela naše dece.
Now, there is an interesting study on that very thing.
Postoji interesantno istraživanje u vezi toga.
They had 3 groups of rats.
Imali su 3 grupe miševa.
One group of rats was given the typical teenager's diet.
I jednoj grupi su dali tipičnu tinejdžersku ishranu.
In each one of the cages, they had 2 choices of water to drink.
I u svakom kabezu su imali izbor od 2 različite vode koju će da piju.
One was pure water.
Jedna je bila čista voda,
The other one had just a little bit, 10% of alcohol in the water.
a druga voda imala nekih 10% alkohola u vodi.
And then they would note how often the rats drank the water with the alcohol.
I onda su gledali koliko često miševi jedu vodu s alkoholom.
Well, it was 52.9% of the time.
52,9% su njih to učinili.
That's about average, people would say. I mean, that's 50-50, that's close.
To je obično prosečno, 50-50.
Rats don't know the difference.
Miševi ne znaju razliku.
But then they had the second group of rats.
Ali onda su imali drugu grupu miševa.
They were given food that was made for laboratory rats.
Hranu koja je napravljena od miševa koji su bili u laboratoriji.
Same two choices of water,
Ista dva izbora vode,
but they only went to the alcohol 18% of the time.
ali oni su otišli da uzimaju alkohol samo 18%.
That means a craving had not been created in their bodies for something more stimulating.
Znači da žudnja za nečim u njihovom telu nije bila stimulisa od nečeg drugog.
Then there was the third group of rats.
Onda je bila treća grupa.
Now, if I were a rat, I would want to be in that group.
Da sam ja miš, ja bih želeo da budem u ovoj trećoj grupi.
They were given a total vegetarian diet.
Znači, dali su je kompletnu vegetarijansku ishranu.
Same two choices of water,
Ista dva izbora vode,
but they went to the alcohol 2.7% of the time.
ali oni su otišli ka alkoholu samo 2,7%.
So what does that tell the researchers?
Šta to govori istraživačima?
When you eat a stimulating diet,
Kada jedete hranu koja stimuliše,
and that's basically have a lot of fat, a lot of sugar,
to je hrana koja ima dosta masnoće, dosta šećera,
a lot of artificial flavorings and colorings and preservatives,
veštačkih zasađivača, boje i konzervanasa,
it's going to create a desire for something that will stimulate you even a little bit more.
kreirat u vama želju da vas stimuliše još više.
But what do rats know?
Ali šta miševi znaju?
So there was a scientist up in the state of Ohio in America.
Postoji naučnik u Ohio, u Sjedinim državama.
Her name was Barbara Reed.
Njeno ime je bilo Barbara Reed.
Remember that name because we're going to look at 3 studies that she did.
Zapamtite to ime, gledat ćemo 3 istraživanja koje ona uradila.
She worked at a prison.
Ona je radila u zatvoru.
Now we realize that prisoners are basically bad characters to begin with.
I mi zaključujemo da su zatvorenici jedna grupa ljudi koji imaju loš karakter.
So she told the man in charge of the prison,
I ona je rekla osobi koja je glavna u zatvoru,
let's remove all the sugary junk food from the diet.
hajmo da otklonimo sav loš šećer, nezdravu hranu iz njihove ishrane.
Now I don't know how prisons are here in Serbia,
Ja ne znam kakvi su zatvori u Srbiji,
but in America they got these things.
ali u Americi oni dobiju ove stvari.
Well, the guy said, okay, give it a try. We're going to have problems, though.
A ovo je rekao, ajde probat ćemo.
First thing that happened,
Prva stvar koja se desila,
fighting went down 82%.
tuče su se smanjile za 82%.
Stealing went down 77%.
Krađa se umanjila za 77%.
Refusal to obey orders went down 55%.
Odbijanje da poslušaju se smanjilo za 55%.
And other types of damaging behaviors went down 65%.
I druge vrste štetnog ponašanja se umanjilo 65%.
That's some pretty good results.
To su dosta dobri rezultati.
You have a child out of control,
Ako imate dete koje je van kontrole,
take the high sugar, high fat away for a while.
otklonite hranu koja ima dosta šećera i dosta masnoće u sebi.
The same scientist, Barbara Reed,
Isti naučnik, Barbara Reed,
trying to answer a very important question.
odgovorila je na jako važno pitanje.
Does diet have a relationship to behavior?
Da li ishrana ima veze sa ponašanjem?
And they looked at various behaviors.
I onda su gledali različite vrste ponašanja.
Depression,
Depresija,
that's the main problem we have.
to je jedna od glavnih stvari, problema koje imamo.
Nightmares,
Noćne more,
mental lapses, can't remember things,
znači stvari koje ne možete setiti, mentalni propusti,
tired all the time,
stalno ste umorni,
violent mood swings.
nasilno ponašanja.
They found the solution to those problems.
Oni su našli soluciju za te probleme.
First thing,
Prva stvar,
just like the prison,
kao i zatvorenici,
remove all the sugary junk foods.
izbacite svu smeće od hrane koja ima dosta šećera.
Sugar is poison to the system.
Šećer je otrov za sistem.
Second thing,
Druga stvar,
remove all the refined carbohydrates from the diet.
eliminišite sve rafinisane ugljenohidrate iz ishrane.
That's white flour and white pasta and white rice and all these other refined things.
To je kao beli hleb, beli pirinač, bele paste, testenine.
The third thing,
Treća stvar,
anything that contain caffeine.
i sve što sadrži kofein.
When they did that,
Kad su oni to učinili,
people suffering from those problems we began with were over it.
ljudi koji su patili od tih problema više ih nisu imali.
Well, people say, but I like my chocolate.
Ali ljudi će reći, ja volim svoju čokoladu.
I need my cup of coffee in the morning.
Meni je potrebna šoljica kafe ujutro.
Well, another interesting study was done.
I još jedno interesantno istraživanje je učinjeno.
The effects of caffeine.
Uticaj kofeina.
Now, I like spiders.
Ja volim paukove.
I peacefully coexist with spiders.
Ja u miru živim sa paukovima.
They eat flies, they eat mosquitoes.
Oni jedu muve i komarce.
And I love to watch them build their webs.
I ja volim da gledam kako oni grade svoje mreže.
It's art. It's beautiful art.
To je prelepa umetnost.
Well, one day they took one of these spiders that built these beautiful webs into the laboratory.
I oni jednog dana uzeli su jednog pauka koji je sagradio u prelepu mrežu i odveli ga u laboratoriju.
Injected it with a small amount of caffeine.
I dali su mu malu dozu kofeina.
About the amount you'd find in 2 spider cups of coffee.
Toliko dovoljno kao što možda nađete u 2 šoljice kafe za ovog pauka.
Then they put them out into a natural environment.
Onda su ga stavili u prirodnu sredinu.
Now it's natural for a spider to spin a web.
Znači, prirodno je za pauka da plete mrežu.
And they can do it fast.
I oni to mogu jako brzo da naprave.
Once it got started,
Kad je krenuo,
24 hours later, it looked like that.
24 sata kasnije ovako izgledalo.
You could hear the bugs in the forest laughing at the spider.
I možete da vidite sve muve u šumi kako se smeju pauku.
48 hours later,
48 sati kasnije,
not a whole lot better,
ništa puno bolje nije.
it took 96 hours for that spider to get that caffeine out of its system.
Bilo je potrebno 96 sati da kofein izađe iz njegovog sistema da bi on mogao da isplete normalnu mrežu.
You know, if a woman who was nursing a baby drinks a cup of coffee,
Ako žena koja doji bebu popije šoljicu kafe,
that will stay in her system for about 6 hours.
to će ostati u njenom sistemu nekih 6 sati.
But the caffeine will concentrate in her breast milk.
Ali kofein će se skoncentrisati u njenom u mleku koje se nalazi u dojkama.
And then the baby nurses from her mother.
I onda beba se hrani od majke.
The caffeine stays in the baby's system for 80 hours.
I onda kofein ostaje u sistemu bebe 80 sati.
And we wonder why they cry all the time,
I onda se pitamo zašto oni stalno plaču,
don't sleep well at night.
ne spavaju dobro u toku noći,
It's the poison we're putting into their bodies.
jer to su otrovi koje stavljamo u njihovo telo.
Now, I've got a confession to make.
Ja moram nešto da vam priznam.
I love cookies.
Ja volim kolače.
And there is a famous type of cookie that I see all around the world.
I postoje poznata vrsta kolača koju ja vidim svugde u svetu.
It's called an Oreo.
To je Oreo.
Yeah, black on the 2 sides and white in the middle.
Znači, crn je na stranama i beli krem unutra.
An experiment done at a university in America.
I eksperiment koji je učinjen u Sjedinjenim državama,
They found that those cookies were as addictive as cocaine and morphine.
kaže da ti kolači stvaraju zavisnost kao kokain i morfijum.
What was it that caused the addiction?
Šta je to što je prouzrokovalo zavisnost?
It was the high fat and high sugar content.
Visoka količina masnoće i šećera u njemu.
Anytime you find those 2 things together, you got problems.
Svaki put kada nađete ove 2 stvari zajedno, imat ćete problem.
And one of your bigger ones that combine both of those things is ice cream.
I jedna od najvećih stvari koje sačinjava to je sladoled.
I love ice cream.
Ja volim sladoled.
Now, let me give you a suggestion about an ice cream alternative.
Evo daću vam primjer jedne alternative za sladoled.
If you have the capability, buy some ripe bananas.
Ako imate mogućnost, kupite banane koje su zrele.
Freeze them.
Zamrznite ih.
And then blend them up with maybe a little bit of soy milk or almond milk, other types of milks.
I onda ih stavite u mikser sa malo sojnog mleka ili mleka od badema i izblendajte.
Very, very tasty.
Jako, jako ukusno.
No free fat, no sugar.
Nema slobodnih masnoća ni šećera.
There was an elementary school in America.
Postojala je osnovna škola u Sjedinjenim Državama.
The teacher wanted to do a special experiment for her students.
Nastavnik je teo da uradi poseban eksperiment sa studentima.
They got 2 cages of mice.
2 kaveza s miševima.
Now, mice are very sociable creatures.
I miševi su društvena bića.
In the one cage, they fed the mice basically simple mouse food.
U jednom kavezu su ga hranili klasičnom hranom za miševe.
You know, it's funny, in America, people used to bait their mouse traps with cheese.
Interesantno je da u Americi ljudi stavljaju obično sir u mišolovke.
Mice don't like cheese.
Miševi ne vole sir.
I bait my mouse traps with peanut butter.
Ja pravim mišolovke, stavim unutra kikiriki.
So here's these mice, they're living together, they're having a great time together.
I evo miševi žive zajedno, imaju dobro vreme tu.
They kept their cage nice and neat.
Održavali su svoj kavez čistim
They would
i
sleep
urednim.
together in a little group at night.
I spavali su zajedno u onoj grupi
Things were good.
I stvari su bile dobre.
But then you have the second cage.
Ali onda smo imali drugi kavez.
They fed them junk food.
Davali su im smeće od hrane.
Cookies, candy, whatever.
Kolače, bombone, šta god.
These rats, these mice did not like each other.
Ovi miševi nisu volili jedni druge.
They would sit over in the corners just looking at each other.
Oni su sedeli u ćoškovima i gledali jedni druge.
They tore their cage to pieces.
I totalno su svoj kavez uništili.
And one day,
I jednog dana
they got into a big fight.
počeli su se tuku.
And they killed one of their cage mates.
I ubili su jednog od njih.
And they ate it.
I onda su ga pojeli.
I'm sure that was very traumatic for the children.
Bilo je jako traumatično za decu.
But I hope they learned a lesson.
Ali ja se nadam da su naučili lekciju.
Okay? In the same city, there was a high school.
U istom gradu bila je škola.
The worst high school in the city.
Najgora škola u gradu.
No, in the state.
Ne samo u gradu, već u državi.
The students were always fighting with each other.
Učenici su se uvek tukli među sobom.
Or fighting with the teachers.
Ili su se tukli sa profesorom.
Wouldn't pay attention in class.
Nisu obraćali pažnju u toku nastave.
Very few ever graduated.
Jako malo njih i završilo srednju školu.
It was so bad, they hired a policeman to walk the hallways.
Toliko je loše bilo da su morali da angažuju policajca da hoda po hodnicima.
Trying to keep the place safe.
Da bi održavao mir.
Then Barbara Reed showed up.
Onda se Barbara Reed pojavila.
Volunteered to provide all the foods for the high school.
Volontirala je da ona obezbedi svu hranu za srednju školu.
They let her.
I oni su to dozvolili.
First thing she did,
Prvu stvar koju je učinila,
all the vending machines,
svi automati
gone.
su nestali,
Went down to the cafeteria.
otišli u menzu,
Anything with chemical ingredients,
sve što je imalo hemijske sastave
gone.
je nestalo.
And then they provided a basic vegetarian diet.
I onda su ih snabdevali sa osnovnom vegetarijanskom ishranom.
Now, because of state law,
Ne zato što je bio državni zakon,
they have to provide some meat.
ali zbog nekih zakona oni su molili neko meso da im
But it was a
ponude.
very small amount.
Ali to je bila jako mala količina.
Within a couple of days,
Za par dana
everything had changed at that school.
sve se promenilo u toj školi.
There was no more fighting.
Više nije bilo tuče.
The students were concentrating on their studies.
Učenici su se koncentrirali na svoje učenja.
This was a study began many years ago.
Ovo istraživanje je počelo pre više godina.
School's not changed.
Škola se nije promenila
And it has a waiting list of people wanting to get in.
i sada imate listu čekanja ljudi koji hoće da uđu u tu školu.
My recommendation,
Moj savjet vam je
follow their advice.
sledite njihov primjer.